Hi everyone, this is Dr. Alana. This is the fourth of the series for early stage researchers, both masters and doctors, and it's appropriate for people who are writing dissertations or thesis, but also people who are writing multiple chapters separately or getting published multiple articles, because when it comes right down to it, research is research, and we're all talking the same thing, even though we do it in slightly different ways. So the conversation today is about methodology. But for those of you watching by recording, I also started today by saying that there are polls in the room, and I've clicked on them that you should be able to go to this and vote for yourself. So I would encourage you to do so. We're running and making changes in the course based upon what we're hearing from people, and with a large population, it's very helpful for you to tell us whether or not you did the homework last week, and if you did it, how did it go for you? Did you appreciate how it helped your graduate work going forward? Most of you have asked for accountability. Do you feel like the homework and the way we're setting up this course is giving you enough deadline so you feel like you have to be accountable? And is it making sense? Survey to class to open office hours to forum as a way of moving through this so that you get the answers you need in a quiet online setting. So thank you for everyone who's taken the time to tell us the answers to that. We very much appreciate it. So what's happening this week? For those in the room, I hope you can get out your fingertips. Good morning to all of you, and I very much appreciate the good mornings coming in. Last week, we worked on problem statement significance, and what was needed for each one, and the resources on the site. So moving from that into methodology, I'd like just a little bit of information from you about how did that go? Do you feel as though you understand those concepts better? Did having the slides give you enough to look back on? Did you write them up yourself? Was it hard? What if it was hard? What made it hard? So I would really appreciate some typing coming in from those in the room, which I'll read out loud for people. So some of you are saying that you're juggling the moving pieces. That's excellent. That's what happens when we begin anything. But now is probably a time when we're beginning to settle into the routine of this course. And of course, others of you, like Penelope here, had multiple things going on, and maybe that's settling out too. The materials from last week were published. I'll check to make sure that's true. And then if you ever have trouble finding things, you can write to Siobhan, Siobhan, at pd.education. And she's the person in charge of getting you the materials you need from the website. If she hears that you're looking for some things and we don't have them posted, she'll probably put them up on the website and send you the link so everybody can have them too. So the first thing to do is to go to the website and see if you can, in the search bars at the top, see if there might already be there. So what am I hearing in the room? I'm hearing that the slides and the discussion on problem statements was helpful, especially seeing and discussing various examples. Thank you for that. I will try to have seeing and discussing various examples as we go through, and I might have some time for that today. How do we find more specifics on what the homework is? Every week, the homework is in the slides, if you can't, and in the recording. So you can zip through the recording to the last section. That's where the homework always is. Or, and if you're not feeling it's explained in depth, that's an interesting statement, Tia. So thank you for saying that. I'll try to be a bit more in depth about it. I have been talking throughout the webinar up to what the homework will be. So if it doesn't make sense, then there's some linkage between what I've said during that session and the homework that isn't clear. And I will, thank you for that. I will see if I can do better. Thank you. Siobhan is really helpful and responds quickly. That's nice to hear. You should also know, though, that Siobhan works part-time on Irish time. So some of you may wait a day or two to get the response just due to her schedule. But she is very helpful, and she does respond quickly. Okay, so then the forum to ask questions. Let me go there right now. These are very good. Just type away, folks. This is how we get questions answered. So I'm going to jump over to screen for a second. Move away from slides, go to screen. You should see it now. And so this is one of your websites. It could be you who come from a university. Of course, it looks like your university. And where is the forum? First,
your screen sharing has been disconnected.
It's having trouble with screen. Oh, it looks like it's still there. It told me it was disconnected, but looks like it's there. So you go to directed learning modules. This bottom one is forum.
Your screen sharing has been disconnected.
Might be bouncing off and on. It is from my end. Anyway, screen share, directed learning modules, forum, and then your forum is the one that's conversation for those who are designing
your
research.
Screen sharing has been disconnected.
Or if your question is a writing question, then you can put it in conversation between beginning research writers. Now, somebody asked me if you can have things
your
reviewed.
Screen sharing has been disconnected.
Can have reviewed, and let's see, it's back. Let's just keep plugging with this. Okay. Can you have items reviewed? I'm not going to review pages of writing, but what I will do, somebody asked whether or not your alignment between sections could be reviewed. And then, yeah, you can send in your table of contents and I can look for alignment. You can send in, you can go to the site and you can do the self-assessments. I get those PDFs, and you can write me and say that you'd like those PDFs to be looked at, or you can put those PDFs up on the forum, and I'll look at them there. I try. The forum's not getting used very much right now. The more it gets used, the more I'll look at it. The quicker your answers will be. So, hope that's helpful. Let's see what else you're saying in a class. Oh, some people didn't say the screen share. Okay, so let me just guide you through it. It was pd.education, for those that screen share was coming and going at my end too. Then it's the first menu, which is called self-directed learning or directed learning. And then forum. And then the first two conversations. The first one is conversations for those designing research. Obviously, you put your research design questions there. And the second one is conversations for beginning research writers. And then you're having questions about the writing, about where things go and that kind of stuff. So, thanks for that. Let me put the slides back up. And we'll see, meanwhile, if there's anything else you want to say about what the homework was like for you. Let's see, do you have, if you were thinking about problem statement, do you remember, and is it clear that it's 2 paragraphs? First paragraph sort of outlines the problem through the perspective of the lit, and the second one outlines how you're going to study that problem. Problem then is something that is measurable in your world that you can get data on, that has a significance that is bigger than just your interest. So it could be to your field, but it doesn't have to be. It can also be to your region or your school district or your subfield, well, like a subfield of biology or sub portion of engineering, not necessarily to engineering as a whole. And then it could also be very intriguing to a smaller, finite group of people. You define that significance, and then the problem is measured in the realm of that significance, as is your lit, as is your argument. So a lot of things tie. One of the things that's very important that you understand, whether at whatever level you're writing, is that you can't jump around in these. That's what causes people to have difficulty and kind of stay longer at this than they want to. You need to be finite, and then that same finite perspective has to travel all the way through. So if you've ever done this and you've had a review come back that said something about multiple points of view, or then that was the reason for it. You were jumping around in significance and argument. And those kind of things happen because until you've done this a while, you have trouble pinning them all down in your head. Once you're through with this, you'll be able to look back, and all the things I say will make much more sense than they do now. And Annalie says that the purpose in the middle is of the helpful slide in the last group. So thank you for passing that on. And as we're talking methodology today, some of you may have questions about particular methodological ideas you have. Please put them in, and please also put them up. I'll make this one a sticky note. Thursdays, tomorrow's open office hours. You can have any question you want, and it will go to, come on, work, www.wooclap.com/summer cues. So if you have questions about your methodology, it's up in you can go there now or anytime until tomorrow. And you can put in very specific questions about methodology if you want, or data collection or data analysis or any of that. And I will try to see if I can answer them with pictures about how this all works. All right, so let's start today looking at this idea of methods versus methodology. First off, I have to say that in the world out there, depending on your field, these words can be used interchangeable, and in my mind, they're not interchangeable, but they can be. You can be told to write a method section. You can be told to write a methodology section. You can see headings of both kinds, but personally, I don't think it's that. I think there is a distinction between them. I think methods is what you do. It's the actions you take. And methodology is the framework you put those actions in. That involves the lit, the reasons, the conceptual frame. That holds the all these pieces together. Just to answer a question that comes up sometimes. So let's talk about the practical issues of writing methodology. Okay, first off, if you've traveled with us at all, you'll know that one of the things I always insist upon is that when you write, the very first thing you think about is who your reader is and what they need to know. And for those of you who are writing for thesis or writing for publication, you need to think about this writer and how much experience they have with research. So the question all readers need is it credible? Is what you're talking about from their point of view, does it seem credible? So you're writing looking forward. I'm going to do this research. So they're going to be asking, if you ask those questions in that way of those people, or if you gather data in that way, simulation, STEM design, whatever, will you have enough data to display the significance you claim your study will have. So let's look at that. Let's say you're a social scientist and your topic has something to do with current events, which have been widespread. And you're making a claim that either people locked down during COVID or whatever, but something big like that. It's a national problem. And therefore, you're going to study that problem, and it's nationally important that people know that. Makes sense, doesn't it? Doesn't make sense, though, to say it that way. It could be important to people nationally, but the significance of your study probably better not be national, because if you think about, if you're in the United States, for instance, 350 million people got affected by COVID. So how big will the study need to be for your data to have significance? And how are you going to get your hands on that many people who are willing to give you data? So you can say it's important at this level, but you need to hone it in. If you're in the state of Louisiana, it might be this many millions of people. If you're in a city, it might be this many. If you're in a rural area so you have to, your significance, pure and out significance is to a finite group. And if you, then your sample, your population is that finite group, then your sample can be a portion of that, and you can make some kind of a statement that if you got your sample right, that it's significant to that group. And it might be interesting to these other groups, but it will not be reliable. It will not be able to transfer. So you have to be aware of kind of who you are and how much reach you have, because we all have big minds. We all think, oh yeah, I mean, I think the work I do could change higher education, but I can't say that as significance until I have global reach, until other things go on. Do you see what I'm saying? It'll be the same for you. You'll have to think, who am I? What is my role? How big will my sample be? How big is the population in my small place? And then how do I write about significance to show that it's also interesting and people will pick it up, and they'll be, it'll have some interest. But the word significance means something more finite. Okay, said enough of that. They'll also ask, can you pull it off? So what I mean by that is it depends a lot on how you write. And I've seen a lot of proposals come in, and what happens is someone is writing about methodology for the first time in their lives. They don't know very much about it, and so they are quoting a lot of people. Creswell, 2017, said this, whatever. That's not going to convince. Now, I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm saying write and do other things as well. Go out and talk to people who have finished or have gotten their data, and ask them what it's like. Learn what it's like. Put yourself in the place of somebody doing this methodology and write like you understand what that takes. For instance, data collection is hard. Do not assume you can get the data you think you can get just because it sounds like a good idea. I've never seen somebody get the data they wanted easily. So, and if you're in STEM, maybe you can. Maybe engineers do because you have a simulation and you can run it. But even then, you're going to run into trouble. And maybe scientists who are in a lab do, but this year, due to COVID, they didn't. So you don't assume you can get your data. Have a plan A, but then also consider how plan B, and it won't hurt you at all if you've thought it out and you put that in your methodology section if you're writing proposal. Because when I'm asking, is this credible? I'm asking, do I think you can pull it off? Not if you're just quoting people, not if your language is sort of mushy. I will have questions. I will drill into you because my job is to find out in that role. My job is to find out what your weaknesses are. So I'm going to look for you not being secure. And trust me, your writing shows us when you are not secure. So do the work, get secure. What drove the decisions you made as you put this together is very useful. And your choice of methodology has a lot to do with that. So for instance, I'm an action researcher. I care, my theoretical frame is pragmatic. I care about not all the philosophical aspects of education. I care about, if I do this, will it help students learn? That's all I care about. So then I do action research and I study that. I write a bit of personal stuff somewhere in this document before the methodology so that you know that, and then you can see that the decisions I made that led me to action research are in line with that. Again, we're looking for everything to go across in a straight line. Now let's see what's come up. Problem statement is 2 paragraphs in the methodology chapter, introduction, or both. Problem statement's usually not in the methodology chapter, Ayana. Problem statement is usually in the background section, and it leads to, it's the first glimpse of the methodology or the way this study will proceed. Not just an introduction or background, I call it. Hi to people who've come in late. My proposal had to include 2 methods, collecting data in person and collecting data virtually because of COVID. Yeah, and have a plan B. If everybody who said they were going to take your interview suddenly is busy when you need to collect data, what are you going to do? How are you going to find them? Okay, let's go on. I talked about this. This is the slide that goes with the rant I have just before this one. Your significance is all those affected in the field, all those affected in your state or your subcategory of your field or whatever is smaller, all those affected in your area or some other subcategory, or your convenience sample, or, which is determined by what you can get to. So to some extent, the vast majority of doctoral work is a convenient sample to some extent, and whether it's always called that. And the question I ask is, will it be purposeful? So what is purposeful? If you are claiming significance in your state, if you're a social scientist, and I'm going to use population. If you're claiming significance in your state, and it's something that affects all people, then you should look at culture, shouldn't you? Because it'll affect people in different cultural or socioeconomic or some other kind of subcategories differently. So then your sample needs to incorporate those subcategories at similar percentages in order for your sample to be purposeful. And if it's not purposeful, it's a weakness, and you need to talk about that in your limitations. Because, all white guys can't talk about what it's like to have the same situation go on in other parts of the world or in other cultures. And unfortunately, it took research a long time to figure that one out. So thanks to the people who are doing critical research, because what you do is you look for the parts that nobody else has found yet, that we haven't been smart enough to find. For instance, the medical world has a whole lot on what medicine for men, not so much on medicine for women. Those are the things that that we're trying to catch up on, aren't we? So that's the chart that shows you then your sample has to be, your population is which one of those you claim for significance, and your sample is a smaller portion of that, and you have to talk to us about how that sample works here. Now let me take that through an engineering example, because I know some of you in the room are engineers. And you're doing a simulation. So you're working on a mechanical issue that is well documented that this something doesn't work as well, and there's some new engineering models that look like it might help. Okay, so the bigger population is everyone who has that or who works within that challenge, and then there'd be subpopulations. So your simulation is probably not going to be about, it depends on how big you craft this, but it's likely that your simulation is going to be on a much smaller portion than the big one. Okay, so then you're claiming significance to this smaller portion with an interest to this? Or does your supervisor think that your simulation is so good that it, in fact, can claim significance to the larger one? This is something you need to work out with your supervisor, but I'm setting you up with the questions to ask. Okay. Now, you've got literature. So you've decided that you're, okay, first off, I'm going to say that personally, I don't care a lot anymore. I used to. And I don't care a lot anymore for the quantitative, qualitative, mixed methods silos of methodological choices. However, you may have been taught that way, and it's still very much around that these silos exist, that people say, I'm going to do a quantitative study or a qualitative study. And really what that tells us is that that's the way you're going to collect your data. That's the kind of data you're going to collect, and that's where you're going to collect it. But it also tells us something else. So when is it appropriate is not always talked about. So my research teachers said, quantitative, think narrow and wide. So you're collecting data from big populations. This is the data you can get in census data, big populations. But you can only ask small questions because you've got to use other people's instruments a lot. You've got to, it's limited. So you can't ask a complex issue about why people chose to make the answers to live in an area they did if all you've got is the data about where they live. So quantitative. Qualitative. Useful to go after the things that make us human, what they call lived experience in that world, the complexities of our lives. Good. So qualitative, quantitative. And here's why I don't think those are very useful silos anymore. Depending on if you're in the STEM scientists, your data collection methods are wrapped right up with the kind of research you're doing. You don't even have to think about it too much until you're the one designing that research. If you're in the social sciences, you probably want both. You probably want as much of this as you can get and as much of this as you can get. And so you look at your topic, you look at your area, and then you decide, what have I got available to me? And can I make a case that that is going to work in the significance that I'm claiming? Okay. Okay. So when you use methodological literature, you are using it to justify your ideas. So you're not going to use it a lot. You're just going to say maybe a paragraph or two. Here are the authors that have guided. Basically what you're going to do is you're going to choose what you want to do, and then you're going to go find the authors that agree with that particular set of choices. And you're going to use them as sort of foundational stepping stones so that you, so that somebody signs off on the fact you know what you're doing. If your university has taught you using particular textbooks, it's useful if you cite those, and if your committee then is made also up from people at that university, it's useful if you cite those textbooks. They're going to kind of expect them. The same thing with, but then you used other reference authors to help you go to where you want to go. So I did action research for my doctorate, and there was taught action research in the university, but that wasn't the book I used because I found another book that really agreed with where I wanted to go more. I used both. That's good. You want a lot, you want a couple of paragraphs, and they They lay out what you're going to do, and they give a lot of group citations, so we know that you've done your homework and you know which textbook authors are backing up your choices. So purposeful, convenient sampling might be something you choose to do. Certainly back up your sampling, cite your sampling decisions. Okay, now I just want to make a note here. If you're in the United States and you're writing a 3-chapter proposal, don't think that your 3 chapters are going to be it at the end, because your methodological chapter at least will probably need to be honed in, because some things you thought you were going to do, you didn't do, or it didn't work out so well, so you did something else. Just plan on the fact that this changes. All right, I have a couple of slides I just want to go through. What you will all face judges of this, and how perfect you have to have it, or what point of view they will look at your work, depends on them, not on you. So I want to tell you the 2 options here. If you have people in your committee who are what I'm going to call an expert researcher, you can go to ResearchGate or you can see their CV, and they've published a lot. They're going to have they're going to look at your proposal differently, or your methodology section differently, than if you have someone who's graduated recently and really their experience with research is maybe their doctoral work in a publication or 2. Okay, so the expert is going to look at a beginner's research proposal, and they're going to say, is this feasible? From everything I know about gathering this kind of data, does this make sense? I'm not going to let you go if I think you've got something there that's only going to cause you headaches afterwards. So with feasibility, is it likely? Is it likely you can get a population that big? Is it likely they will answer your question? So an example, I reviewed one yesterday, a person at a teacher level, let's say moderate administrative level in a school district, wanted to ask a lot of superintendents some questions. Is it likely? Not so likely. What's the hook for the superintendents? So ask yourself, what's the hook for these people? Am I going role-wise above my level? If I am, how? Why? One thing you can do to get the why is you can go to the organizations they belong to and have the organization, see if you can get the organization to sponsor your research. Then they'll do it, not for you, but for the organization. See, people tend to answer questions of people up the ladder from them rather than down in a hierarchical world. To some extent, we all live there. So those are about the barriers. And then, and in the lab work, you know, it would be things like, are you writing a simulation that's really so particular that I think it's very advanced? And if so, why do I think that lab can help you do that? So those are the practical, feasible questions. And are you specific enough in the way it is written that it's believable you can do this without stumbling? So if I know there are 6 steps to getting this thing anywhere close to done, and you only tell me about the first one and the last one, that's a danger signal to me. And because if you stumble over 2, 3, and 4, then your data may not be valid, or it may drop. And we see a lot of people come in year 5 who have data from year 1. It may not even be valid anymore. There's just issues. So that's what an expert looks at. The person who's newer in the field is going to look at what you do against what the university says you have to do, and they're going to be, are you ticking all the boxes? Is your discussion of your methodology backed up by references they can believe? Do you agree on what they know or cite what they teach? That kind of thing. So you have to be good at both of these, because you don't know for sure which kind of personality and thought pattern you're up against. Now I'm just quickly saying this is, you don't have to worry about final defense today, but I'm teaching another class that goes that way, and data analysis your methodology today becomes your data analysis tomorrow, and your data analysis tomorrow ends up being whether or not you graduate. So this is what I call the heart of what you are doing. It has got to be a solid enough heart that tomorrow when you have data, the data serves you well to answer the questions you asked. So an expert looks at final defense and they say, is this data robust enough? Does it, to what extent, and this is an important one, to what extent did you search for contradicting evidence? You all, everybody does. We go into research, we have an idea of what we're going to get. We kind of want to get that cool thing that we think we can get that's going to add to our field. But are we diligent enough looking for every little answer that contradicts? Because it's often the contradictory answers that broaden our story, that make what we do better and more believable and everything else. So at the end, you need to show me that you looked for the contradictory evidence. Bias is that thought that I had, that I knew what I was doing before I got there. And if you are lucky enough, your research will take you into a world you didn't know about beforehand, because that's when research is really fun. So is there evidence in your writing of bias in the data collection? Did you perhaps kind of hone in the data collection so you got what you were looking for? Is there power in your numbers? Is your sample so small that it can't extrapolate to the population that you are saying you are significant to? And have you done a good job of reporting all the limitations, including your setup limitations, including what we call reflexing with an X, which is my questioning how I set the research up to get the answers I got. And then non-experts are looking for kind of more of the tick boxing stuff. If it's, but the stuff on the left, you need to be aware that what you are writing right now in methodology will be judged that way in the future when you have data. So, set it up so that you get yes answers for those two. Okay. I thought when I wrote this that I was going, or when I did today, that I was going to make a checklist for you on methodology. And I found that there's some great ones out there. So I highly recommend, the handouts are in the handouts, these slides are in the handouts, and I highly recommend you click on that top one. It's a checklist for methodology, and it's very well written. Now, the second one is also great. It's a textbook chapter from Sage on this chapter, and the checklist for the chapter, it's a 5-chapter model. So, but again, everybody's talking about this in the same way. You just have to think particular to your circumstances. And then from Oregon, and applicable to all kinds of data, it's about methodology sections in reports. And reports are very similar to what we do in journals, but they're all good. It'll give you this look. If methodology is in the center, I've given you really good resources that look at it from slightly different angles. And I think it's useful to us when we take on a big concept like this, that we do force ourselves to look at it from multiple angles so that we develop some sophistication around what we are doing as early as possible. And then, of course, master students and doctoral students and everywhere in between, there are a ton of resources up on the pd.education site. The first 3, there's a series called bringing your topic in line with your methodologies, and there's a slides and video and spreadsheet as well. And then at the bottom, if you haven't met Professora Maria, she's very good at bringing things down into finite steps. And she did a full webinar on this chapter this last spring. So it's at the one at the bottom. I recommend them all. Okay. So I bet there's lots of buzz going on in your head. And as I go set up some things we can look at, let's see, we've got about 15 minutes. I'll take about 5 or 10 of those to look at a couple of things to kind of give you some examples of how people think, how examiners think when they look at stuff. So the more you can kind of absorb that other point of view, I think it might be helpful. And in the meantime, please start asking your questions in the chat. And Erica, you can't be too specific. That's the answer to this. You can't be too specific. Yeah, specificity looks like you know what you're doing. And okay, no questions coming in. Let me just move to this and see if I can get it big enough to be on your screen usefully, a useful size for you before I go to screen share. All right. Now, fingers crossed, screen share works better than it did before. Okay, this is an education example. The primary goal of this study was to answer the research questions that relate to sustainable
Your screen sharing has been disconnected.
Effective online professional learning that incorporates reflective thought and collaborative community among colleagues to support ongoing professional growth and teacher efficacy. That's a big sentence for what you're doing. Try to make it smaller. Try to be able to say, the primary goal of this research is to see what motivates teachers in professional development and whether or not that's being used. It would be about half that length of words, and it would say about the same thing. And you want to make your first, any time you start a new section, your first sentence should be punchy. You should make it an active verb. You should make it a short sentence. You should make it like a stage more punchy than you're even comfortable with, because you have to pick the reader up and help them carry along. And those sentences do that for us as readers. The research question, so this will be an interpretive phenomenological study that attempts to answer the following questions. I just want to say, if you're in the qualitative social science world, if you do grounded study or you do phenomenology, be really careful, because those two methodologies have developed a lot in the last few years, and people have been known to be very pickish at the end if you did it right. So when you choose a methodology, do a little research about you might Google search the issues in phenomenology or challenges in or debates in, something like that, to see if you get a lot of answers. If you do, is that really something you want to be in the middle of when you're just trying to get your work done? Because in the qualitative world, there's a lot of ways to say we do it, and yet finitely, our experience of doing it is very much the same one-to-one-to-one. So what are characteristics of online professional development? So she has questions. All right, now she has 4 questions. What are the characteristics of online professional development? What are teachers' perceptions? What are teachers' perceptions of something else? And what do teachers perceive as necessary? There's a couple of strategies here for her to consider. One strategy is the usefulness in having 4 finite questions is that then when you ask them and you get data back under those 4 questions, it's a little easier to group all your data into those questions and code it and theme it and understand what people said. The hardship is this question, and for this I'm referring you to a whole series of things we have on the, if you look up Boje, B-O-J-E, you're going to find we did 4 webinars with a man who's really at the leading edge of qualitative studies. And his idea is that interviews are outdated. They really just don't get us where we want to go. Where we really want to go is to have a conversation with people, because conversation is back and forth and we both have skin in the game and we take it to a bigger level of what is going on in this thing we want to study. To some extent, that goes on in interviews. And to some extent, you ask these 4 questions and the answers are going to overlap. And it gets messy when you have to sort them all out back into questions, etc. So there's pros and cons. Do you ask one question and then you, or maybe a couple of questions and, so how do you organize it? You organize it so that you're going to get the data at the end that is as easy for you to do the work you have to do in analysis and also be able to claim the significance you said you were claiming. So we don't know from this, because we haven't seen the other story, is how big her significance is. She's asking teachers. So, that limits the significance perhaps. All right, conceptual design. I talked about last week, but if you didn't hear it, I'm quoting this book, Reason and Rigor. The authors are Ravitch, R-A-V-I-T-C-H, and Riggin. This is their first edition, published in 2012. And in it, they say, conceptual frameworks are comprised of 3 primary elements: our personal interests, our topical research, and the theoretical frame. A lot of people question the difference between theoretical frames and conceptual frames, and that does it. Very small. It is embedded within the literature, and or why we chose the literature we chose, and that whole thing is embedded in our personal interests, or maybe our personal interests are embedded in this larger bit of literature. Okay, let's look back to methodological design. To learn how teachers experience online professional learning, a phenomenological study will be conducted. This approach to qualitative research seeks to expose the experiences of participants as individuals and then synthesize those findings holistically to understand the central phenomenon of those 4 questions. Let's talk about that. What she's just said in that sentence is that she's got to do 2 kinds of data analysis. She's got to look at each person like a spreadsheet and kind of where they fell on these 4 things. And then she's got to look at the totality of it. So, think about the things that they're telling you in your methodology section and how that literally translates into the work you have to do. It's not too bad, but you're taking on twice as much thematic work because you made that choice. Procedure. Data collection will include collecting teachers' perceptions while experiencing a professional learning through viewing videos and participating in collaborative and reflective activities in an online setting. As an examiner, I think that sentence is mushy. I'd much rather have you say there will be 4 kinds of data collected. They will be through a digital language conducted during this professional learning experience, through I'm missing the word of when we watch, when we write down things as we're watching. It's something go on that would be done through videos, and then How is she going to, she says, and participating in collaborative and reflective activities in an online setting. You don't gather data from participating in a reflective activity. So I'm just showing you the finiteness of how a sentence can throw your reader off completely. Like as soon as she says that, everything inside of me goes, what? That sounds like a lot, and it doesn't make, I want to know how, I want to know why. This is under the procedure section. If you were going into a medical environment, you would want your doctor to say, I'm going to do this, and then this, and then this, and then this. And likely this will happen, this will happen, and this will happen. That is how you want people to talk to you about procedure. So you don't write long paragraphs, and you don't make them kind of, you're not writing procedure in the same tone of voice as you're writing your lit. You're not writing this is instrumentation, and she's looking at how the different things are going to be done. I just won't go there. If you're in the STEM scientists, and your instrumentation is probably what exactly you're doing and who designed it, or if you're doing an engineering simulation, it's how it was set up, very, very specific. And she's saying that this is survey tools, and these were the survey tools, and this is how the survey would be done, and how the sample was collected. Let's assume all of that is just picture perfect. Interesting, she's using the word data gathering. Usually it's collection, treatment of data. That's usually analysis. And then limitations of the study. You really need to perhaps talk to somebody who's done a lot of studies and ask them what your limitations likely are. And I think it's because I look to the idea that you're only going to be able to absolutely be significant to this big a pot, but you want to make a case that the bigger pot will pay of interest. Therein lies the majority of your limitations. Okay, I hope that was helpful. Okay, so I got some questions. The research book is Reason and Rigor, and it's by Ravitch, Ravitch, and Riggan, Riggan. This is the first edition. There is, and it was 2012. There is a second edition, at least I know. And good, you look, Lee already looked it up. How conceptual frameworks guide research. Yep, there it is. Siobhan's email is siobhan@pd.education. And what other questions do we have in the room? Let me see what we've got on time. 4 minutes. Okay. No, actually, we have lots of time, right? Yeah, we're not starting until either that or I ran over completely. I apologize. Oh, good. I guess my watch is off. It's not 6:30, huh? My watch is completely off. Yeah, 4:55, 5 minutes. Okay. Let's see. Can you download? Very helpful. It was wondering if the recording of this webinar will be available. Yes, and everyone who signs up for a webinar will get the recording. In fact, starting next week, if you signed up through the website for the whole summer program, and that, let's see if I can get you that link if you didn't, then we will just push the recordings to everybody who did, because it occurred to us that if you had signed up using this summer, that even if you weren't getting the logos, even if you had unsubscribed at some point, by the way, if you've unsubscribed to our emails, you're not getting them. And because the people we use for emails, that's the link there to, that's the link to that if you haven't signed up for the whole gig. Everybody who has signed up for the whole gig will get all the recordings if they haven't unsubscribed from those. Okay, let me go into homework. Back to slides. Okay, so the race ahead. We've got 4 weeks going on here. So what are those weeks involved? That you are working every day, that you have your models, that you've set up Microsoft Word so that you can do what you saw on the screen I had, so that you have the navigation pane over to the left and you can jump around your document, and you have it set up so you can have Microsoft Word talk to you, and you've done all those pieces. And if you haven't done those pieces, go to the pd.education site, search on MS Word, and you'll see the videos that teach you how to do that. You might want to go to the self-assessments and test your ideas and test against the different criteria. You can come to office hours right now, like right after this. It's the open office hours that we don't record, where people put up their webcams and have conversations, and who knows what we talk about. And then there's the going to wooclap.com/summer cues, and you put in questions and I answer them. By the way, tomorrow only has a couple of questions there. So hopefully you'll be populating tomorrow's with the questions you had from today. You want to move ahead, and this is the specificity of the homework for the person that asked me for it earlier. You want to move ahead by doing two things. You want to go to the pd.education site and you want to do the logic of design tool. You will find that on the right-hand side under my tasks, under self-assessments. Or you can scroll down to the bottom over on the left-hand side are all the self-assessments, and one of them is the logic of design tool. So we've given you a couple of ways you can do it. What you do, though, is you massage it as you go. So you write in the box, and then you go through, you say, take the left-hand button, and it asks you questions. You have to answer those questions yes. You have to keep massaging what's in the box until you can answer yes before you go on to the next one, or that particular exercise won't mean a lot to you. Because it is to help you get those boxes so that they are robust enough in what you say that at the bottom you can just pick out the phrases, and those phrases tell you what you need in your lit. And we can do that in an office hours if somebody wants to watch me do it. Okay, so then we're going to talk about the mind mapping. Okay, so this is what methodology needs to look like. This is like the equivalent of that helpful slide with purpose last time. This is now talking about methodology. So in your background section, you claimed a certain level of significance. You then have to have lit in the topical research idea that backs up that claim. And if your claim is level of practice, then you're going to talk to us about that in your personal interests and also in the gaps of the lit. Your methodology section, these things go across to, so that's your conceptual design. That's your significance to your conceptual design. Now you take your conceptual design and you get it to methodology. The topical research goes into your choice of population. The gaps in the lit absolutely goes to your choice in the population. And as does the gaps in the lit help your theoretical base, and your theory helps your sample size. So for instance, I'll give you an example because that one's a little hard to follow. Theoretically, if I'm pragmatic, then I care about getting things done, then my sample is going to include people whose job it is to get that particular thing done. If my theoretical is empirical, then my sample is going to be much bigger because I'm going to have to show that it is researchable at an empirical level. I'm going to use an instrument. So your theoretical base determines a lot of those things. And Erica says it is a lovely book. It's a lovely book. This is a book the whole entire research community waited for. It's a lovely book. They do a great job of explaining what was previously mysterious to a lot of us. Okay, for those of you that aren't yet ready to write, I want you to spend time drawing. I want you to go to last week's slide and draw the relationship between problem, and significance, and go to this week's slide and draw out significance to conceptual design to methodology. I want you to think about what that means, put words on those lines, begin to understand what you know and what you don't know so you can go back to the lit and figure it out. And please, when you get to those questions, go to the forum and ask them, and go to the come to office hours and ask them, because those are the kinds of questions we love in office hours. And write out your equivalent relationships. If you have it drawn, you can write it better. That is just so true. So spending some time drawing, even though you're under a writing deadline, will save. Another thing is to speak before you write. We access our prefrontal cortex when we look up. So I'm sure you've all thought about something and you have this kind of look on your face. You can't type when you're accessing like that, but you will speak with more clarity. You will sort it more distinctly. You'll have it in your head differently. So the way to get around that is to talk. And what I do when I write books is I have Dragon on my phone, and I record my language, and then I get it over to, I export it through Evernote for me to Microsoft Word, and then I have my rough draft done. It's very rough, but it's beginning. Okay. Was that specific enough? Would somebody give me a yes to whether or not this homework is specific enough that you feel like you can do it? Because that was a good comment earlier. Do you draw in PowerPoint or do you have suggestions? I draw in PowerPoint usually. Yeah, it's easiest for me. And I use their tool, their Smart. These are all done in Smart Art. I find the drawing software just takes me too much time to learn it, and PowerPoint's easiest. I also draw out. I also draw. I also write too. I think there's another thing that comes with our hand-eye coordination when we write. So just a couple of things in our 30 seconds before we end. Actually, I'm 5 minutes over. Office hours right now. I'm going there right now. We don't record. Office hours tomorrow. wooclap.com/summer cues. The link at the bottom, which is in your slides, is will take you to where you can sign up for everything. You really should sign up for everything. It just makes it easier for you to get in at the time and all those other things. And if you sign up for the office hours, you'll get them. I don't send notices for office hours. So you have to do that work in order to get there. And please, just like I asked you to do the polls today, let me see how many people. Only 13 people did polls, and well, 15 in the room. That's pretty good. And be sure that your voice is heard. Go to SurveyMonkey, our Scholars Summer, and tell us how it's going. We watch that. We take what you say seriously. Some of you are the outliers we need to hear from so we can make the system work better for everybody. So thank you very much. I'm kicking you all out now because I'm rushing off to that other office hours. And thanks for being here.